I don't know.
Some just hold your hand.
I'm not worried about the class, is what it is, but I'll go.
If you could please join me saying the pledge for me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Certainly. Frost.
Here.
Argwal.
Here.
Wesson.
Here.
Moon's here. No.
Here.
Shang.
Here.
We are 6 tonight.
Is there any correspondence?
None on my desk.
Okay. Do we have any visitor statements? Hi. If you would, I think you know the drill, but if
Yep.
you would please.
Hi, my name is Dale McLean. I have been a resident and property owner in Lincolnshire for over nearly 20 years. I am disappointed in the lack of home value appreciation in the last 20 years, which I believe is directly caused by decisions by this board. I only have 3 minutes, so I will be direct. I will spend 2 minutes reminding the board of your decisions affecting home values and 1 minute with a recommendation. Nearly 2 decades ago, this board approved a tax assessment which resulted in about a $10 million a year surplus, operating surplus. Instead of subsequently lowering the tax assessment to be in line with the spending, this board has repeatedly and continued to approve tax assessments which generate that level of operating surplus. As I reported to the board on June 21st of this year, from 2006 to 2018, the Stevenson board approved budgets which generated an operating surplus averaging $9.7 million a year. So I'll round that to $10 million a year for 13 consecutive years. This resulted in an operating surplus, our fund balance, of $143.9 million. Again, I'll just round that to 144 million. Some people call this accumulation a reserve, some call it a fund balance. A skeptical person might call this, at this level of reserves, maybe a slush fund. I realize some level of reserve may be legitimate. However, to me, a 1.5 year cash reserves for an institution that receives over 90% of its revenue that's almost guaranteed from property values. That stretches the level of intellectual honesty to me. Growing this fund balance to 130 million in 2017 was apparently not enough, so the board raised an additional approximately $50 million of funding, issuing 2 separate $25 working cash bonds, one in 2014, one in 2018, and subsequently abated that, which means they released it for spending. These bonds do not require taxpayer approval and are above the maximum tax allowed by law. This working cash law was created to ensure districts had enough cash on hand during the school year, and that makes sense. It repeated issuing this non-taxpayer approved bond though, and then subsequently abating the funds probably begins to stretch the intellectual honesty. Lastly, while taxpayer funding for normal capital spending seems appropriate, major capital footprint expansion seems to be the purview of the taxpayer. Interestingly, by building a $144 million fund balance, Stevenson seems to be in a position to circumvent the need for any referendum for major capital footprint expansion, such as an indoor new track or classroom expansion. To summarize, building a $144 million reserve by taking property owners, by taxing property owners about $10 million a year for 13 years in excess of their actual spending, using a working capital loan technique which has effectively circumvented the taxpayer approval for nearly $50 million, and approving major capital footprint expansion that ineffective and circumvents the need for taxpayer referendum. In my opinion, that's intellectually challenging. How do we fix this? 3 things, very simple. In the next budget discussion, reduce the annual tax assessment by $10 million a year. Second, stop circumventing taxpayer approval for the by the serial use of working capital the working cash loophole. And lastly, delay any incomplete footprint expansion and submit all future footprint expansion to taxpayer referendum, regardless of whether there's a fund balance. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or statements tonight? Okay, Nick, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. We have a pretty hefty one since homecoming and homecoming week has passed. So, to jump right into it, like I mentioned, homecoming passed, so that was the culminating event for student activities tradition season. So now we're moving on to gratitude. I think there are 4 seasons throughout the whole school year. And with gratitude comes Giveathon, can collections, and a bunch of other activities that just reflect gratitude. So I think that was one important thing to note, especially because as we move into the holiday season, I think that's just like an overall theme. Okay, so starting off with student council, the pictures are a little cropped in the frames, but that's okay. So the 4 main things I'm going to talk about today are homecoming, the assembly, student congress, and can collections. So starting off with homecoming, that pictures just a behind the scenes photo of student council e-board decorating for the dance. So on Thursday night before the dance, we have all of our general members help decorate, and then the Friday afterward, the entire e-board takes a day off of school and we prep the hallways, and then also my team was working on getting ready for the assembly. So one important metric for homecoming is that we sold 2,800 tickets this year. So that is well over half of the student body, which is super important because with homecoming, it is just a community event. And when we were talking about student council's purpose at the beginning of the year and recently in our reflections, community is something that's always brought up in our mission statement. So to have over half the student body in one event is amazing for us.
And it's our highest homecoming
Yes.
total in the history of the school.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then also something that we were talking about when we were debriefing as a student council is just that obviously we didn't have homecoming last year and we had virtual assemblies. So I think it was less of a school dance for fun, but more a school dance out of necessity just to bring back Stevenson culture and get everyone reintegrated into the school. And then also, moving on to the assembly, when we had our Senate meeting, which is just a meeting between all 4 class boards and student council, it was widely agreed upon that homecoming assembly was a top highlight of the homecoming week. So these are the home stands in the football stadium, and as you can see, they are completely packed. So I just think, based off of views, we don't actually have actual numbers, but it is pretty evident that this was our biggest assembly as well. So to have 2 huge events back to back is really important for student council. This was also our first homecoming assembly in the stadium, which I think was a great option for COVID, and then also it accommodates the sheer amount of students that showed up for the assembly. So that was super amazing.
For the first time ever, the entire student group got to see the band do their marching, or their halftime performance. It was incredible.
A lot of, like I said, it was the season of tradition, so great of you to bring up the band. Obviously, as our football is huge for student culture. I think everyone looks forward to Friday nights to attend football games. So we had pretty much our own halftime show during the assembly period during the day. And then also we had a couple of student groups do fun activities for everyone to watch. And then the third thing I have on here is Student Congress. So Student Congress is held every activity period. So it's been happening consistently on Mondays, about once a month. So through 2 Student Congress meetings, we've accumulated over 60 petitions. So this is kind of just a subsection of Student Council. And I think it's a great way to represent student voice, because if anyone because class representatives can go to this meeting during activity period and talk about any grievances or things that they think they can improve upon that will help the student experience day to day. And my team is actually reviewing them. So this year we're having a super public list of all the petitions that we've received and seeing where they are along the process, because obviously they get submitted through a Google form, and then student council general members review them and see which ones are feasible, and then our executive board votes on them, and then they get passed up through administration and student activities. So that's just kind of the process, and it's being very transparent this year, which I think is important for all students to look at. And then the last thing I have is can collection. So this really aligns with the upcoming season of gratitude. So student council is supporting NHS in their effort to promote and help families during the holiday season. So I think we are going to call Long Grove Sunset as well as the Marianos on 22. So in the upcoming weekends, we'll have some general members and boards sit out and collect cans. So people will go in the store and they see our signs. Hopefully they'll come back out and donate a few cans. So that's how it always works. And that's been super fruitful for the past couple of years. And moving on to FMP. So recruitment season is upon us. I think I touched on this last time during FMP. Also, this picture's from Ms. Dittman's email, so that was nice for me to get. And then also in FMP, something super important, the Signs of Suicide or SOS program is running an advisory. So freshmen will not only be in advisory for half period, they'll be there for the whole period, and lunch will be provided for them. And I think SOS is not only essential for freshmen, but also mentors alike. I think as leaders in the school and people who kind of develop and create the culture among the school, it's important for us to be able to identify signs in others and even ourselves. And one thing that I've heard about regarding mental health that I always like to keep in the back of my mind is it's okay not to be okay, but you shouldn't be able to suffer in silence. I think as students at Stevenson High School, we have so many resources at our disposal to be used. Like our SST is absolutely amazing. I love every member on my SST, and I've talked to them when I've gotten a pass or when I just need someone to talk to. So definitely lots of trusted adults and programs within our school that can be used that can help students. Then for NHS, so this is NHS's payday with gratitude. So going back last week, so the blood drive happened on Friday, and it ran through periods 3 through 8 in the wrestling room. As you can see in the bottom left corner, that's me donating blood. I don't think it shows too much, so hopefully no one gets like queasy or anything. But over 100 units of blood were donated, so that approximately saves about 300 lives, so that's super awesome. And then moving on to Giveathon, this is something that I've done every year at Stevenson, and I think there are a bunch of kids who love Giveathon season, so it's central to the season of gratitude. So the classroom leader, so basically for Giveathon, there are 3 to 4 classroom leaders for each class every period of the day, and you go around selling items or just fundraising through classes like fundraising in class like Penny Wars or anything like that. And in November, you actually go out and buy gifts for families, or that money goes towards donated baby food, supplies, or anything like that. So this year, they're helping out 300 families, and I'm actually working, I'm being a classroom leader for my English class. So I'm working with Olivia DeFalco and Aish Dixit, 2 of my good friends, and so we'll be doing that. And then, yes. And then moving on to service outreach, one thing that was mentioned at the recent NHS General Meeting is tutoring at Jack London Middle School. So this is just an NHS experience for any member to do. So there are 7 spots, and what's significant about this is it's helping out another school in our community. So it's deemed service outreach, and with COVID that has been on pause for 18 months. So it's super exciting to see another aspect of NHS come back in person. And then Slack and Senate updates. So Slack is just a bunch of leaders from different clubs, and that meeting was held a few weeks ago. So one thing that we talked about was vision and specifically what will make this year the best year ever. So it's a lot of rhetorical questions that you ask or that you answer within your table groups. And it's really just an amazing time to reflect to make sure that your club is really grounded in its initial values. And then also we debriefed homecoming, which is something that we also did during Senate because student government is super involved with the homecoming decorating process. And then also the other activity we did during Slack was defining our culture in 3 words and also kind of determining what our ideal culture would be. So an overarching theme that I saw during this meeting was that we have a lot of student engagement, which I think they're just reflected in the metrics. Like I said, for homecoming and the assembly, we've had the biggest turnout we've ever had. So I think we have students' attention when it comes to putting on events and building a sense of community. It's all about just making sure that everyone is super, everyone's like super going along with Stevenson tradition in that sense. Because with COVID, sophomores didn't really have an in-person experience, so it's almost like sophomores are freshmen, and it's up to juniors and seniors to kind of instill Stevenson values in them. I think that was also reflected in homecoming, like the line outside was very chaotic. That's something that we also said about our current culture. So it's about making sure that we turn that energy and making it into something positive, because we do have the most excitement from the student body that we've ever had. And last slide. Oh, and this is also a graph from Mr. Eddy, sorry. So he made that. So like I said, we have a lot of student engagement right now because it's homecoming and the assembly, and then it also dies down as we get into the school year. And then this actually represents winter break, which is kind of sad. But it picks up at the end of the school year because summer break. So it's, he said our goal is to keep this as a horizontal line, which I'm hoping we can continue with Giveathon and other events coming up.
I think Mr. Uddy, actually, that's a potential and kinetic energy graph for a roller coaster as well.
Yeah, I know, he's gonna find the second derivative to find the acceleration of
Just
this.
to be sure. Not so sure, but.
Okay, student highlights, last slide, best slide. So something super excited that's in person again is Diversity Council's World Fair. So it's coming up on the 23rd and 24th of this month. And I think DivCo is super important for the numerous affinity groups at our school. I think one that I've really noticed this year is ISA, or the Indian Student Association. A lot of kids that I know are a part of that, and they've been planning for this. So I think it's super important that they're able to show their pride and their culture through World's Fair. And then another thing that I had on here was Abhisanka. So Political Action Club is hosting Zooms with guest speakers, and he was one of them. So he's a Stevenson alum, and he talked about working with the Biden administration with government-funded COVID research. And he was super helpful, not only in providing insight into what he did during the pandemic, but also his experience as a student leader since he was involved in debate and student council. And fun fact, he was the only student council member to hold 3 officer positions. So I needed to pick his brain about that one. But then next up, we have Stevenson boys hockey. So like I said last meeting, I think that Stevenson soccer has also had amazing student turnout. But also Stevenson boys hockey is a team to look out for. They just beat the #1 ranked team in the state. And a bunch of my friends are going on the weekends, and that's actually a picture in the bottom left corner. I think that's from Amuse Disposable. He also took pictures during dance decorations for student council, so shout out to him. Mr. Schwenk, you showed up to this meeting. I use your smug mug every other meeting. But this time I use Amuse Disposable. So that's it for Stevenson boys hockey. And then October 15th was the date set by the College Career Center to turn in all early applications for college. Let me emphasize that it was a suggestion. I'm canceling all my plans until November 2nd. So that's kind of where I think the senior class is at right now. And then some stuff that I didn't get to fit on the slides. This was mentioned at Slack, but Kiva Club, which is focused on helping entrepreneurs in third world countries, is hosting Ballapalooza on October 30th with a benefit night at Culver's, and all proceeds go to their mission. Pure Helpers is hosting an LGBTQ Awareness Week at the end of October. My friend Aditi Ambervan and Student Council VP was elected Illinois Congressional Debate Association's captain to captains. So she basically leads captain meetings during state tournaments and sets the agenda for an equity initiative within the association. And then also the Skaterets are performing between the second and third periods during the hockey game on the 30th. So going back to students and boys hockey and how that's really garnering a lot of student attention. Any questions?
Is that it?
I feel like I'm talking at like a million per second, but yeah.
Really fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So before Nick goes on, I do want to share two more things just that are important, I think, for the students. On Wednesday this week, we're having our no homework night, so people can have conversations with their family about their class choices for next year as the course book comes out. And secondly, just an interesting thing for homecoming, first time ever, we had the girls field hockey team perform on homecoming. And so instead of having a sophomore football game, the girls got to play field hockey on the field in front of the fans. And then after that was the football game. And I think it was awesome. Trish Bethhauser, our athletic director, it was a great experience. So I think we're gonna try as we move forward every year to have different sports get a chance to be highlighted during the homecoming game. So that was awesome as well.
The homework night is also known as Do Your College Apps Night for some That's what I'm doing.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Okay, Dr. Fadal.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. And we are excited to continue with our curriculum team presentations last month for our folks from our engineering and computer science and technology division. You may not know, but this is only the second time we've been back in action with our curriculum team meetings. So we're excited to see you here tonight. We had to take a little break with COVID, but we're excited to continue our monthly team presentations for our board. And as you all know, we've been focusing the last couple of years on our social emotional learning initiative during these presentations. So I will turn it over to Wendy to introduce her
We keep growing.
team of people here
Keep
tonight.
growing.
Yes, this is awesome.
Yeah, this is the technology education team, and I think they'll go into just a little bit about there now, as Eric said, in our new division of computer science, engineering, and technology. So this is the technology and engineering half of the division. So they're very excited to be here. And if you want to put the presentation, you put the photos up as we introduce. So this is quite the group of individuals. You see the personalities definitely come out in our pictures. Matt Swank. So our core leader is Michael Anderson. Team leader is Frank Radistitz. And then Griffin Fordberg, Ryan May, Pam Vukovic, Kate Rossi, and Kelly Smith. And I'll hand it over to Mike to start us off, or Brian start us off. Oh, Matt is fine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So just a little bit about the CSET division. We are a relatively new division. Starting in the year, the 2019 school year, some opportunities came around to actually put into place some discussions that have been happening for a few years about joining the two divisions together. Computer science had been in the math department. We were in the applied arts department, but I think we found with the course offerings, as well as a lot of times the future goals of the students that take both classes, there was a great opportunity there for us to combine and kind of integrate our curriculums together and make sure that we can offer more succinct pathways for our students that choose to do this at secondary levels or careers. This is a little bit of our course offerings. We have engineering courses, architecture courses, our technology media courses, and our computer science courses. So currently right now, this is our catalog, and we are in discussions about how we can further integrate ourselves together as one new division.
I also went the wrong way.
Technology did.
So, with all these course offerings that we have, the people that you see in front of you now, we teach pretty much, I guess I'll call it a lowercase r shape of courses. It's a lot of classes to teach amongst all of us. So we've got a lot of classes that don't necessarily overlap with each other in terms of curriculum, but in terms of theories and how we teach them, how the kids learn in them, there is a lot of overlap. So we looked at our student voice survey, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with at this point. We've been offering it. We have data going back to fall of 2017 for this. We looked at, before starting a challenging project in this class, how often do you think about the best way to approach that problem? And then we also looked at, when you get stuck while learning something new in this class, how likely are you to try different strategies? So these two questions kind of guide a lot of our classes, regardless of what the curriculum is. Again, it's all about that method of learning, essentially. And what we kind of notice with all of our classes is that we have this one kind of common theme in mind. We all have these long-term projects that kids are going to be working on, and with those long-term projects, there's not necessarily guaranteed success with that, okay? So if you're looking at the data here, basically, when we look at the positive responses that kids are indicating to us, we hit our peak in spring of 2020, which we all know what then happened after spring of 2020. And it's the same for both graphs, essentially. So what we're looking at doing is potentially, writing our course of action here on this. So again, why we chose these, first of all, the nature of our classes. In some form or way, we all deal with a design process that we're walking through or guiding our kids through. Another important factor with this stuff is talking about these long-term projects, talking about the way that we are designing projects or learning new content, is this idea of self-efficacy, how students are kind of gauging their own ability levels. I think we've all had conversations with people where we've talked about, how do the kids actually gauge how well they're doing, and everyone does it differently, but especially with last year being the way that it was, I think students kind of lost track of that ability to kind of gauge themselves because they had a lot of different resources in place that they wouldn't normally have, and now we're all transitioning back into a more traditional environment. We have to be mindful of that. Okay, we're all changing the ways that we're learning here. Along with that is just growth in general. So having that growth mindset, understanding that you can fail and grow from it, and just understanding that your skills now are not the skills that you will possess later on.
Thank you. So we are currently using this SEL pathway that Molly has given to us, so thank you very much to Molly. And our work started, like May said, by collecting this data for several years, going back to fall of 2017. So with that, as well as some of us being a part of SEL cadres and our work with Molly, we are now in this stage of finding commitments and how we're going to act on those commitments. So that leads us into our next steps, which are building these practices and implementing some high leverage teaching practices. So we're in that commit and expand stage. We just collected our fall of 2021 student voice data. So we just collected that data, and we're excited to look at that. And now we're into this commit and expand, and it's down. Yes, cool, got it right. So these are our commitments, and these are kind of our informal goals. They're kind of what we were talking about when we looked at our data and what we've been collecting it, and we compared it, where does that data fall in terms of these CASEL competencies? CASEL is an organization based in Illinois that has put together these 5 competencies, which are 5 skills or abilities that we value students to have, so we know that they are being successful with their social emotional learning and social emotional growth. So the 2 areas that we identified were self-awareness and then self-management. So we want to connect these CASEL competencies to that kind of informal goal of being problem solvers and how we deal with failure in the case of larger problems. So under self-awareness, we want to have a growth mindset when we experience failure, not to just get stuck in one spot. And that leads us into self-management, where we also want to make sure that when we fail, that it's not the most tragic thing in the world. Understand how we can look at failure in a positive light and glean from that. We also are looking at using planning and organizational skills so that we avoid failure. And that would be great, that'd be really ideal. But also planning on what happens when we do experience failure. How do we go back and use that information that we got from failing in an iterative action, so we're continuously improving. And then the last one is showing courage to take initiative, and we want to encourage students to try risky things because that's fun, it's innovative, and that's how we innovate in our classroom. So we want to try new things and encourage students to take initiative, try something that's risky, and it might fail, but we'll deal with that when it happens.
So this is our timeline. So in September, we met as a team to set our SEL goals for the year. Our next step is to develop common language, as you saw from all the different courses that we have. That's going to be kind of our next step, is to work through that. Then we'll create a student pre-assessment, working on self-assessment and reflection. We'll then administer the spring student voice survey. We will reflect on that data. We'll continue to work with Molly, and then we'll develop a plan of attack from the start of the next school year. So our goals are going to be to establish a culture that embraces taking risks and approaches challenges from different directions. We want to reward students by demonstrating the ability to solve problems in unique ways. We also want to reflect on the success and the failures within the design process, our projects, all of that together.
All right, so one of the first things that we want to do following this board presentation is sit down as a team and create a common language that we're going to use in all of our classes that establishes a culture of risk-taking. So one of the things that we kind of thought of initially was using permission to fail, which is what Troy has given all of us teachers, is the permission to fail. And we want to make sure that we tell our students that it's okay to fail in our classes. We actually expect you to, and we're going to help you through that process. And the goal is to keep trying and then eventually succeed. Another thing that we want to show our students is that even as adults, we take risks and we fail, and that's okay. And we want them to see that and understand that that's going to happen in their life, and that's okay. So one of the things that, one of the classes that we think we can implement this common language in right away is our advanced architectural design class. So students during their beach house project have a wide variety of options to communicate their first rounds of designs. As you can see on the projector screen, students can build physical models. That middle bottom one is actually Minecraft. If they want to design Minecraft, they can. Or they have a wide variety of apps on their iPads, or they can do kind of the traditional paper and pencil. As of right now, without this common language and really stressing that it's okay to fail, 90% of my students just dive into paper and pencil because that's what they're comfortable with. So one of the things we're thinking about doing is telling our students, okay, out of these options, which tool are you most comfortable with and which tool are you least comfortable with? And then asking students to actually do a design using that tool they're comfortable with, and then also do another iteration of their design using a tool that they're not as comfortable with, and getting them out of that comfort zone and telling them that's okay if they don't feel comfortable with it.
Awesome. So the next thing that we're kind of looking at as an opportunity for our students is finding ways to reward students who take risks. So as we've been talking about, a bunch of our classes are all centered around trying to encourage students to take these risks, appropriate risks obviously, but trying to attempt these new things. And then what can we do to celebrate the risks that they're taking, and then continue to encourage new ideas. So one thing that we're looking into doing is rewriting our success criteria to encourage the diversity of ideas. So have it built right into our EBR grading, that how can we show students that taking risks is part of our courses and something that should be attempted and tried, not having this constant fear of failure. Hey, let's take a risk and see what we can do from it. In our engineering, architecture, and design courses, documentation is a part of that. You know, if students are documenting the process, they have this kind of backbone to fall back on it. Even if something wasn't working, what can I show you to kind of prove what I tried and why it didn't work? Ultimately, the hope would be that students learn from that reflection, and then as time permits, they have the opportunity to try again. So the class I teach that really fits this mold perfectly is our Capstone engineering course. The whole goal of this course is for students to identify their own problems, identify the criteria of success for those problems, then basically work through the process of research and development to create solutions. This class is a giant risk for a whole year, so it actually is a risk for a year, because there's no clear-cut answer to the problems that they're trying to solve. They're not just hopping on, Google and Googling the answer. They're just not watching YouTube tutorials. This is something that students are very uncomfortable with. This is something that's not familiar to them in a lot of the classes that they take. And it's something that really is a roller coaster of trying something, learning how to fail, learning to learn from that fail, and then bouncing back to hopefully make more progress. And I use this saying of like 1 step back for 2 steps forward all the time in that class. You get an idea of a couple of the example problems and solutions on this slide right here, where students trying to design crutches that are more energy efficient and more comfortable. We have students that are trying to design a kind of a retrofit damper system for homes that would regulate temperature throughout. So using Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, communicating between those 2 devices to actually solve this problem. And again, these are things that students have very little experience with coming into classes. They have to try new things, and they have to kind of learn from their trial and error throughout the year.
All right, another big piece that we felt falls into this is reflecting on your designs. And so we do, like we said, a lot of those long-term projects, and if we get to the end of the project and we just end it there, then we're putting the focus on just whatever that product is. And so our thoughts are, what if we stopped, slowed down a little bit, and had the students reflect? There's going to be a handful of students that come up with a successful design. There's going to be a handful that come up with a design that maybe didn't match the criteria, maybe failed in a sense. So having them reflect on those would have the students push their further. The learning doesn't stop at the product. Now what we can ask questions for the students whose designs didn't work, like what would you do differently next time? What failed? What parts were successful? And how can we incorporate the successful pieces and redesign the unsuccessful pieces? And having students talk through that and actually take the time to stop and reflect on their designs, we think could be a good piece. And then if possible, and every class is going to be different, but if there's time to offer reperformance, then I think giving them that chance to redesign and try again is huge. We can also, within those reflections, because we will have students whose their design met the criteria that we set up for them, but then we can push their thinking even a little bit farther by saying, okay, what would you do if, and we change some of the constraints and requirements. What if you had more time? What if you had more supplies? What if, whatever the design is, what if you had more power? Whatever that might be. So it just pushes their learning a little bit further than stopping at their initial product. Over here, this is an example from print media. And so the students, they're learning vector illustration, and then they're also learning how to use our laser cutter and engraver. And so they come up with a design, some sort of product. So in this case, the student's creating a keychain. And then they go through that process, they design it, it looks great on the computer, they output it on the laser cutter and realize, oh no, all those pieces they are all separate, so it doesn't hold together. And I think as adults, it's really easy for us to jump in and natural to be like, all right, well, what happened? They don't touch, let's help you get them together. But I think that one thing that we'd like to do is work into our classes that before we intervene and before we provide feedback, let students look at it and ask questions like, did it match your intended design? What went wrong? What would you do different? And then that allows, I kind of put a couple different ways that project could have been solved or done differently, where if we intervene, we tend to probably push them in one direction, when our whole class, what we're saying is there's so many different options and so many different ways to solve the problem. So allowing students to test out their proposed solution, I think is really big. And so we're gonna try to incorporate that into our classes as much as we possibly can.
All right, so to wrap up, how do we know if our team is achieving our goals and our commitments to increase students' management, self-awareness? It's going to be reflective in our data of our student voice survey. So as you see from the pandemic, the numbers went down for both, how often students find the best way to approach the problem, and then also how likely they are to try a new strategy. So for both of these, we would see that these would be increasing back to pre-pandemic. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Oh, sure.
Well, you've got seniors who are going to graduate this year. Where are they going with this knowledge post-secondary? there colleges that they can go to? Is there businesses that want them?
I think it's both. Everything that we try to do in our classes, whether it's the software or the concepts we're teaching, we try to align to whether it's industry standards or what's been going on at different universities. So I know like the the machines that we use, whether it's the laser engraver, the cutter, the 3D printer, those are all something that they'll see whether it's in industry or on during their post-high school education. Even the software we all do, every piece of software, whether it's Autodesk software, Adobe software, we make sure we're actually using things that are going to help them be prepared for what they're seeing at school or in careers. I think most of the curriculum also has been aligned to what is going to best prepare students for courses. Like the engineering course that I was talking about, that's a course that a lot of students will see either their freshman year of college or their senior year of college. It's a design capstone course. Typically, it's done over a semester. There's a lot more freedom to it, where they check in with their professor, once or twice a semester sometimes. So it's much more like guided structure, high school feel for something to better prepare them. And I think I can probably speak for everyone that every year around, I don't know, probably close to winter break, we get some nice emails from students saying like the stuff that they learn in our classes is helping them in college. And at a tough time of year sometimes, it's like a really pleasant surprise from these students.
I have several questions and comments. So how many students are in these classes?
How many total? Wendy?
I was not prepared for that question. So, let's see, we have 8 teachers teaching, well, we're teaching overloads.
There's a whole teacher that we're sucking up as overload.
So we have an equivalent of 9 teachers teaching 5 sections of 28 students each semester.
I have to tell you, I find what you just did unbelievably exciting. And it's in addition to being prepared for college and what you're doing, you're really teaching life skills. I don't care what you're going to do to adopt the SEL skills that you're teaching and have a project or a goal long-term and work and do the documentation you're talking about and keep track. I mean, this is life skills, whether you're gonna be, I don't care what you're doing. And the way you're teaching it is absolutely fantastic. And the way you're making use of the resources that we provided for the types of courses and classes that you've got, I'm thrilled. It's great.
This team very much values the problem-solving skills, and that's a really hard skill to teach in one semester class. So by providing it 4 years where they're hearing the same language, they're hearing the same message across the board, helps build that confidence and skills along the way.
I just have to share with you, so I'm a retired lawyer. I know. One of the partners that I had in was a chemical engineering undergrad, and then he went to law school. And the way he thought and the way he approached problems and analyzing deal structure and our workflow, the skills that you're describing, he was amazing. So those skills really came into play just in practice of law, which I could keep talking. This is great.
So, did you look it up too? Yeah, I looked it up. 1,050. Wow.
Wait, 1,050 students?
1,050 students.
Yeah.
Some might be the same.
Ish.
I don't know if
Ish.
some kid might be taking more than one class, but.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I have a question. What do you see as the next evolution of this program?
It's interesting that you're asking that question because since we've only been an actual division for a year and a half-ish, and that was during a pandemic. So actually this late arrival coming up on Thursday, the whole team is coming together and visioning out what the next 5 years are gonna look like. So we've already started to take a look at curriculum. And there's some courses that were already kind of overlapping a little bit where we have a couple like computer science courses that are now kids could take as prerequisites for like electrical engineering programs. So we're trying to figure out how to integrate because we know students are gonna need all of those skills. So trying to find different pathways for students for success.
Another thing we were looking at too is, it was actually something that Kelly Smith looked into a few years ago, was students leaving Stevenson with certifications in different pieces of software. So things that can actually be transferable, whether it's jobs or something on a resume moving forward, but some sort of official recognition. You know, how can we better prepare kids for what's the next step for them?
Are you offering any dual credit courses? Or not yet?
Not currently. Some of our programs, like when we first introduced the Project Lead the Way programs along the way, those are still recognized in some universities, and we always encourage all of our students to take always the final end exam for any university they go to. It may not get them credit, but it may get them to the next level up, or may get them into a program. It may get them on a letter of recommendation immediately into the School of Engineering, for example. But that's one thing Mike was talking about that we want to really explore more with that.
Just anecdotally, I don't need an actual number, but how many would you say of your kids sort of try whichever field just as a whim, I want to take something different, and how many come in saying, well, I know I want to be an engineer, and so I'm going to go through this, you know, is it a mix of that?
Yeah.
I teach a lot of the introductory engineering courses, so I can just anecdotally say from my end that I'd say more recently we've got like a perfect combination of things, of like STEM being a very like spotlighted career paths in the last couple of years. And we do get a good mixture of people that are like, I want to be an engineer, I know I want to be an engineer, let's plan let's start doing my job applications now. So we get those people, which are awesome because they just bring a crazy amount of enthusiasm. But then I think recently, with a lot of the work that we've done with like our hour of code that we do with our middle schools, we also do visits to our middle schools and have like a STEM day where we go visit them and bring activities and kind of talk about what we have to offer. I think we're getting a lot of students that may not be predisposed to like pursuing that as a career, but are dipping their toes in the water, which I think is amazing at a school like this where there's so many opportunities that we're able to kind of spark that interest that they may not know if that's what they want to do forever, but they want to try it. So I think there's just going to be continued growth in that aspect. And I think that's a direct reflection of the work that we put in, kind of spotlighting what we can do in our classes with those kids.
I remember when we first went to like changing up the structure that had been in place for many years, there was this big question that kept going into it with, what are you offering for the students who are like gung-ho, this is my thing, and then what are you offering for those students who are taking it as an elective? And I think a lot of our presentation that went in, that we talked about today, that problem solving, it really doesn't matter what career you go into. These are gonna be life skills that help them in any area.
Absolutely. And hats off to you guys, that's great. Risk-taking and, you know, being able to fail and creating a safe space for that it's really needed for our students, and I really appreciate that you're doing that.
What is the pool of the survey you presented?
I don't think we heard you, sorry.
What's the pool of students you presented the survey about? Is it about students who have taken the courses in your department?
It's all the students in our courses. So each year currently in your course they take it. So we do one in the fall and then one in the spring, and we administer it to our whole class load.
And then as you envision how the department is going to develop and offer new courses, it's nice to hear like the graduates providing kind of feedback, thank you, I'm so happy I learned this. But then on the other hand, have you thought about collecting feedback from graduates who would say, oh, I wish I've learned something?
So we actually, and you'll hear this, I don't know that you heard it your first year, but we'll actually hear in November from our student services division. They do our 1-year and 5-year surveys of our graduate students, and we ask exactly those questions. What are courses that you wished you had taken while you were at Stevenson? What courses, do you wish that we had offered but we didn't offer? They have all of that data, and we're gonna share that at the November board meeting from Student Services. And that actually has impacted a lot of the thinking that has gone on with Wendy and her teams, about courses to offer as well. And in fact, early on, and I'm looking at this group, they're so young, like, but 10 years ago, when they were all in middle school, 10 years ago when, when we were first kind of rolling out, or 15 years ago now, this project lead, this engineering and project lead the way stuff, a lot of this, as Wendy will remember, was really kind of new and cutting edge, and it was really our kids on our senior surveys, our graduates, who were saying, I really wish there were more engineering classes at Stevenson, and that's what really pushed us into this, 10, 15 years ago, and 10, 15 years later, look at where we're at. We have now an entire department devoted to engineering, technology, computer science. So that is exactly as how we tend to operate, is we rely a lot on, our graduates to give us feedback.
Excellent.
Is that a fair summary?
Yes,
Wendy?
very much.
So I have another question. What's the gender ratio in your classes? Is it
That's a good
more
question.
even? Is it leaning one or the other?
I think it depends a little bit of the course. I would say,
Yeah, the technology design's pretty even.
I would say the technology, architecture is pretty even. As we get to the upper level engineering,
It's getting, anecdotally, it's getting better. I think we also have our Girls with STEAM Club too, where they, in our architecture and engineering clubs, the numbers are more diverse there. I think we're starting to see a lot of that like filter through, and then not just take the introductory, but move on to the second, third, and capstone classes as well.
And that data is actually available in Panorama, so next time we meet, we'll explore that.
Thank you guys so much. That was really amazing.
Yeah, thank
Awesome. Well done.
Thank you.
Quite a change from doing t-shirts.
we still do a little. A little bit.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving right along. We have tonight just a quick snapshot for you of our enrollment numbers as of September 30th of this year. We are at 4,354 students. Again, this number moves and fluctuates. There's no such thing as the 6-day enrollment really anymore. The state does ask for enrollment on a certain date, but that old number is, no longer used. But as of September 30th, we're at 4,354 students. That is tracking, Sean, right about where the numbers from Decision Insight have been projecting. So we'll just continue to keep our eye on that. And thanks to Decision Insight and our feeder schools, and the work that Sean's been doing with them to keep updating those numbers, because it gives us a very clear picture of where we're going to be over the course of the next few years. And again, by 2030, 8 years from now-ish, we could be in that 4,800, 4,900 student range. So that's the number of kids who are currently in the feeder districts who are going to be moving up to us eventually.
It doesn't count anything on the new developments.
Does not include new development. So those are butts in seats, if you will.
They're coming,
They're coming. All right, the next item we have for you, for your approval, is an intergovernmental agreement for the sharing of student data for educational study. This is something we mentioned to you previously, but we are going to be bringing to you over the course of the next few meetings separate intergovernmental agreements with our 3 primary feeder districts, so that we can share very specific data as it relates to student achievement for our elementary and middle schools, and then our high school as well. We just feel like we'd be in a much better position to be able to analyze and study and make decisions about course offerings and interventions and supports and everything moving kids from middle school to high school. It's difficult to do that without having a very clear picture of the data that the elementary and middle schools have. So tonight, we're bringing to you an intergovernmental agreement for the sharing of student data for educational study. This one is specific to Kildeer Countryside District 96 that is being presented tonight.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions for Eric on the agreement?
The only other thing I'll add is that over the course of the next, and this one has already been improved, Carol, I think by District 96.
Yes.
And then over the course of the next couple months, we're waiting to get approval from District 102 and 103.
Okay.
They're really gonna do it?
Yes.
Would you poll the board, please?
Certainly. Artwell.
Aye.
Orson.
Aye.
Moons, aye. No.
Aye.
Shane.
Aye.
Frost.
Aye.
Carries 6-0.
Okay, and then the other two items we have for you are first readings. One is the approval of our action steps for our goals, projects, and initiatives, which you approved last month. Mark is continuing to work with the administrative team on making sure that we've identified what are the specific steps that we want to take toward those GPIs. And so we'll finalize those and bring those back to the board in November, Mark. Admittedly, we're about 1 month behind on this process, if you recall. It's just that this year, coming out of COVID, things were still a little bit wonky at the start of the year. So Mark and the admin team, though, are doing really great work, and we're excited about where we're at, and we only have some minor changes to bring to you before November. And then the second first reading we have for you is a new series of board policy updates. If you look at those, however, nearly every single one of them, Carol, is
Legal reference.
footnotes, references, and things like that. So we'll bring those back to you as well in November. And then we'll also bring to you the next iteration of the press release. And then we should be all caught up with our pandemic gap of board policy updates.
And I just want to thank Carol, because I noticed it in this policy, the 2265, that you went back and filled in the stuff that we were talking about.
The legal counsel, yes.
So those two items will be coming to you in November for your approval. You'll also see the personnel report there for you that will present in as part of the consent agenda. And then we will not need an executive session following the meeting, as we had one prior to the meeting. And then that takes us to the business section. And Sean, you want to begin with our lead certification?
Of course. As the board is well, yeah, recertification. As the board is cognizant, the East Building Addition, Phase 1 received LEED Platinum notification, and that was after our original building received gold certification from LEED as an existing building. Back in 2015 back in 2015 as well as in 2010. It's now time for us to recertify again. And the need behind the recertification is really just a verification that our building is operating in the following the sustainable practices that we've outlined in our board policy. So it's important that we verify every 5 years that we have that we are continuing to follow those sustainability practices that the board has decided are important to our community. So with that tonight, we are following any discussion, we are recommending that the Board of Education approve a contract with White & Company for consulting services related to the sustainability and LEED recognition at a cost not to exceed $38,150.
Can you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Well, and the other point that we talked about at the last meeting, Sean, is that it's not just the sustainability, it's also confirming that the savings and financial
are realized
and any changes we need to do.
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
This all plays into the amount of energy that's purchased and used, for sure.
Any questions for Sean? Other questions? Would you poll the board, please?
Certainly. Arwell.
Aye.
Orson.
Aye.
Moons, aye. No.
Aye.
Shane.
Aye.
Frost.
Aye.
It carries 6-0.
Okay, The next item is approval of our recommendation for new registration software, and I'll let Sean talk through this in a minute, but I'll tell you that over the years, if there's been one complaint that we've heard in May and June that Troy and I usually get from parents, it's how cumbersome our registration software is. And so one of the things that we asked Sean and Doug to do is look to see if there's a different solution to this problem, because we have so many different inputs from payments for athletics to yearbooks to the foundation to the PPA's notebook or guidebook or whatever it is. That now we're also verifying residency, and there's just so many inputs that the current system is a real struggle for our parents to navigate and utilize. So Sean, kind of tell us where you're at with this and what the recommendation is.
Absolutely, that would be great. Yeah, we looked at this 5 years ago as we periodically look at all of our software, and we felt like at that time we could continue to operate with the existing software. But that software at this point is kind of past its useful life. And so we evaluated several out-of-the-box, or what I'll call out-of-the-box software packages. And really what they're fine in the primary function of registering a student. However, it would force us, as Eric mentioned, to use multiple different platforms for a student, or for basically a family, to not only register but then also pay their fees. Everything would go through a particular portal, and we could not find one that not only would do what we needed on the front end, the front-facing end, but also on the back end in terms of generating reports, downloading the information to put into our student management system, and then downloading the money that's collected to put in our financial software system as well. So we evaluated several, and at the end of the day, none of those features would allow us the custom nature and the one-stop shopping that we want to provide for our families, so that they don't have to go to multiple places. And so what we ended up with is we'd like to work with Netrix, and if you recall, Netrix is the company that helped us build our interactive report card, which is now very popular and widely used, and I think many people are envious of what we've built. People, I mean other schools, of course. They're envious of what we built, and what we would like to do is basically do the same thing with this custom software. The nice thing about the software is that there's no annual licensing fees. We would we would own this software, and therefore it's really kind of our product. We don't have to charge ourselves a licensing fee. And so if you were to look at an out-of-the-box feature that has, licensing fees associated with on an annual basis, and if you were to look at a custom software, the payback is around 10 years, and that's assuming that we don't have to pay any money whatsoever with the out-of-the-box feature to customize it,
right.
Which is almost never true. And the other thing is that with the back-end reporting that we would get out of our custom software, we wouldn't be open to human error for translating data that came out of the system and then uploading it into a different software. So tonight we are going to make the recommendation to the Board of Education to approve Netrix to build a registration software system at a cost not to exceed $150,000.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions for Sean?
I have like a million questions. They're very technical in nature and pretty specific.
Better suited for Doug.
I would really like to delay this if that's not gonna completely throw everything off. So I have a little more time to really dig into it with you and Doug. Because what you're taking on, it's $150,000. That's not gonna be a one-time expenditure, and the ongoing costs, there's a whole nother and there are questions I have about the security of the platform, the modification of it. What's the impact with the impending upgrade to Windows 11, and how's that gonna impact servers and the platform that this runs on? and questions way beyond some of the things that you touched on, that I'm
Just one quick thought.
a lot of technical
Yeah, this number
questions
is
about this.
an exaggerated number. Doug thinks it's gonna be significantly less. This was the number to kind of throw out there.
Yeah, well, I think it will be significantly more, actually.
Yeah, this is, I think, highly
Yeah, I-
understated.
I would really like to have a deeper conversation with you guys.
Yeah,
Where
I
are you
had
on the
similar
timing?
questions on.
So these, certainly we could have conversations about it. However, the timing of this, if we were to implement, if this were to be implemented in time for the summer registration for the 22-23 school year, which typically occurs at about the second or third week of June, we would want to make sure that they have enough time to complete the build. So
We have a registration software today, right?
What's that?
We have a registration software today. It's not
Well-
like we won't be able to register kids next year.
We do,
we would have to pay for that licensing fee.
but it's very cumbersome, it's prone to error, there's a lot of mistakes. We have multiple systems at place, so it is far less than ideal. I mean, this is not, the system that we have right now is, it's just terribly inefficient. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do for us. It's,
So Doug spends way more time on the back end of this than he should ever spend.
Yeah,
We're not
and-
even including his time and energy.
So let me, Eric and I were just talking for a moment, if we had the motion subject to approval of the technology committee, and if you guys could meet with Doug and
Gary and Hina.
Gary and Hina,
I couldn't do that.
and Sean.
It would be perfect for me.
Be careful what you ask for there, see?
I
Cause the reality is, if we get too far, away from this, we're just not gonna have time for the bill. And then we would be kind of delaying it one more year, and so if we could, pull together that meeting.
I can make it happen.
We can make that happen in the next couple of weeks, so that if the technology committee approves it, then we can still, move forward in mid-November, later November. That would still keep us probably on a time frame.
Sure. It would certainly, absolutely.
And that,
Is that
Okay. Yeah,
acceptable?
okay,
Okay, so we'll modify the motion.
yeah, Carol already did.
So the motion now reads that we
And
would
what is
ask
the
the.
do we call it the technology committee?
Executive technology.
Executive technology committee, please.
I can't
So do we
say
wanna
that.
pass this motion as amended?
As amended.
As amended. And before we do that, are there any other questions or that people want to ask?
What is the ongoing cost of the existing system?
It's a great question. I think we're up to $12,000 a year now on this particular software.
But that doesn't,
But just,
That
that's
doesn't
just the base licensing fee.
yeah, that does not include all of the customization work that we have to do.
Correct.
In addition to that $12,000 a year. So
Correct.
we're constantly trying to modify that existing registration software with other technology solutions.
Is that a custom solution too?
No.
No.
What is it?
It's tweaked. It's registrar.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So any system like that, we're gonna have to customize. Like even if in
Well,
campus,
see, that leads to some of the questions that I have for you guys. What about the process itself? Maybe there's a problem with the process. That if there's commercial software available that hundreds, if not thousands of districts are taking advantage of, maybe there's something amiss with the process that you're using, that you can't use the same kind of software. No, I'm not expecting an answer.
Correct. Well, no, I'll answer that.
And
I
I
think that's-
apologize
yeah,
for
no, I
throwing
think
it out there.
I'll answer that. I think, I know a lot of those people who use those systems, and they end up doing exactly what we're doing, which is they end up spending more time and money on the registration processes because those solutions don't do for them what they need them to do. So they'll have the registration system, but then like we have, then you have a whole nother process that you have to go through to submit your healthcare forms. You have a whole nother process You have to go through for residency forms, you have a whole nother process you have to go through for, you know, you have parking, for athletic fees, for, so parents end
Possibly
up going
vaccination.
to like 4, 5, 6, 7 different places because no out-of-the-box solution is going to give you the portal, the process that you need. So they end up having multiple processes for what could be and should be a fairly simple portal to register your student.
So I have a,
lips to God's ears, yes.
All for the low, low price of,
Yeah, okay.
right.
so I have a question, not a technical question like they're asking. In the past, when we've incurred expense like this for something that we then owned and didn't have the license, haven't we also actually licensed it to other
Yes,
schools?
we have and we can.
We have.
So would we be, if with this, would we be able to license it and charge fees to other schools?
Yes. We do that with the IRC.
ERCs right now.
Then we would be liable for their security issues too.
No, from Netrix,
It's, yeah,
not from us. We're not
yeah,
putting people on our network.
yeah.
The technology is what we're licensing, we're not putting people on our network.
There's a liability associated with selling the software.
Yeah.
If Sarah does ABC, and who maintains all that moving forward when the underlying operating systems and databases change?
Explore limiting the liability.
All of those things are what,
How does that happen?
all of those things are what's in our agreements that our lawyers write up.
Lawyers that are not retired.
Lawyers who are not retired have already created those documents for us and they're already out there.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so this will be pending approval of the Executive Technology Committee and we will get that meeting on the books.
We need to vote for it.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions before we vote? Would you please poll the board?
Certainly. Gorson.
Aye.
Moon's aye. No.
Aye.
Shang.
Aye.
Frost.
Aye.
Arwell.
Aye.
Well, it carries 6-0. There you go.
Okay, moving on to our construction drawings for the summer of 2022 projects. We had a more in-depth conversation about this at our site facility meeting in October, on October 4th. There were a series of projects that we discussed. We did remove projects. We did remove a couple of projects that we talked about that weren't necessarily preventative maintenance and or renovations to improve the instruction of what's going on in the classroom. The estimates that we came up for October were between $7.1 and $7.5 million, but as we remove those other projects, it will be under $7 million. And once we receive the actual bids, my guess is they'll be more in line with that 5% figure that we've talked about. To give everybody an idea, 5% of our budget this year would be $6.3 million. So we would be spending basically the 5% that's recommended that we've talked about for years in terms of what we should spend on our facility to ensure that our facility doesn't fall apart. And in fact, we'll get to our carpeting bid here, and our carpeting bid came in $130,000 under bid. But we do have to authorize White and Company to create construction drawings from the designs that they have already created. The expense here is only for White and Company. It does not guarantee that the construction is going to occur. Those decisions will be brought to the board in February for the board's final approval before before we actually begin on any of the projects. So tonight we are only asking for the Board of Education to approve White and Company to create construction drawings for the summer of 2022 projects as discussed at the site and facility meetings at a cost not to exceed $286,900.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions? We talked through this at the same facilities. Any other questions for Shalon?
Is the expense for the drawing also included in the budget?
Correct, yes. That is correct.
But we will not be getting drawings on the things that we said.
Correct, we've eliminated those other
collaborative.
projects, those are not in there, so that figure will come down, it's an estimate that we then true up once the projects are completed.
Would you poll the board, please?
Moons, oh, aye. No?
Aye.
Shane?
Aye.
Frost? Arwell?
Aye.
Gorson?
Aye.
Carries 6-0.
Thank you. The second part of this has to do with then, once we authorize White to actually create construction drawings, we have to authorize Gilbane and Company to conduct a bid on our behalf for all the projects so that we can get a final dollar to present to the board so the board knows the true cost of all the construction items. So tonight, we will be asking the Board of Education to authorize Gilbane to conduct a bid on behalf of the district for the summer 2022 renovation projects.
So moved.
Second.
Again, we talked about this at site facilities. Any other questions for Sean? Would you pull the board?
No?
Aye.
Shane?
Aye.
Frost?
Aye.
Arwell?
Aye.
Gorson?
Aye.
Moon's aye. Carries 6-0.
As I previously just mentioned, one of the things that I'm gonna be asking for tonight is the approval for a carpet installation. We went ahead and actually bid the carpet replacement earlier because we would like to take advantage of both winter break as well as spring break to replace the carpeting that's worn and torn and needs to be replaced anyway. We put out the bid. We received 5 different bids, although I will tell you that the winning bidder or the lowest bidder, I should say, Midway Flooring did ask to remove their bid because they had missed a part of the scope. We did agree to allow them to withdraw their bid. The second lowest bidder was about $6,000 more than the low bid. And that was for commercial carpet consultants. And so tonight we are recommending to the Board of Education to award the summer 2022 carpet installation contract to commercial carpet consultants at a cost not to exceed $147,140.85.
Can you have a motion?
Second.
Questions for Sean? So
This
this
isn't
is,
the people that were in it last year that we had to undo, did it?
Yes, so we had a really an unfortunate situation with our contractor from the summer of '21. They were less than, they did not meet our needs as they had kind of promised they would. So we actually pulled back and did not do as much carpet installation last summer because we were fearful that they couldn't complete it.
So is this making up for that?
We've included some of this scope in that, but we didn't pay for that previously. We only paid them for the work that was actually conducted. We put them on notice.
But will we be on schedule now,
Yes.
whatever they didn't do?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
pick up and be on our schedule?
Yeah, and that's part of why we're normally we just do spring break in summer. That's why we added winter break.
Okay.
Thank you.
any other questions?
No, it's too bad Libertyville tile didn't come in better, but, oh well.
Okay, would you pull the board, please?
Sure. Shane?
Aye.
Frost?
Aye.
Arwell?
Aye.
Gorson?
Aye.
Moon's aye. No.
Aye.
6-0. We're into carpeting again.
And then the last piece of business that I have for the board tonight is the awarding of a Cnc machine bid. So a Cnc machine is significantly safer. It's primarily used, this one's going to be used for our theater and stage crafters and design, theater students that are in stage crafters and set design. And the CNC machine, as I mentioned, is significantly safer. It's also way more accurate than traditional tools, such as like a router, so a handheld router. So we did conduct a bid and last week, and there were 3 bidders that came in. The lowest bid was from Laguna Tools. So we are recommending to the Board of Education that they award the purchase of a CNC machine to Laguna Tools at a cost not to exceed $39,309.10.
Can you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Questions for Sean?
Well, okay. might be a dumb question, but what is a CNC machine?
That was my question.
Not a, it's certainly not
I get what that is.
it's certainly not a dumb question by any stretch of the imagination. I probably should have gone better, more into detail to it anyway. Basically, it's a giant router that allows us to take wood or other pieces of equipment, cut it out on a much larger scale. So a 4x8 sheet of plywood, we could actually cut out and make Mickey Mouse ears if we wanted to. Or we could, you know, whatever the design is calling for, we can cut it up. It's kind of like those engraving machines that you're talking about that they were seeing. And so we could work on a series of metals and cut it out at a much safer than actually having to use power saws and tools to
Do
do that.
students do this? We let students
Oh,
use
yes.
this machine? Wow.
So
Makes
for
me
this
nervous.
machine, you just design the shape?
Yeah.
And then you just,
Oh, and then
the
they
machine
cut
is
it out.
Hands off, the machine cuts it.
That's why it's safer than.
Yes,
Got it.
Is
this makes me nervous every year.
Is this used in those technology classes?
They have a different type of machine over in those classes. Certainly, unfortunately, their lab is on the opposite side of our building, so kind of designing, we would have to take over what they're doing, and these projects can take a while to cut out once they're fully done and functioning.
And where does the CNC machine live during the year?
It will live in our little kind of tech room, if you will, that's behind the Performing Arts Center stage. We have a scene shop in there where students and the staff work on all of the designs for the various performances that we put on every year.
How long does this thing, what's the useful life of this thing?
Great question. I did not ask that question, but I would imagine it's several, this is 10 years, but I don't know. I can find out and I'll let you know for sure. But I'll go back. Actually, Matt, you might know. Like 10 years?
At least 10 years.
There you go.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anybody that's had any major issues with one or had to replace any significant parts. It's a fairly simple machine. And so I think it's pretty easily serviceable on it as well.
Okay, so this should last.
This should last us a while.
Do we have one that we're replacing or is
No, this is a new one.
This is
They
new.
budgeted for it, they asked for it, I was all in favor from a safety perspective.
Right.
We were all in favor, we were certainly in favor of that, put it in the budget at an appropriate time. I've actually been delaying them for
So if it's in the
probably a couple
budget-
years.
If it's in the budget, did we need to bring it to the board?
Yes, because it was over
It's over
25,000. Great question.
How many days
Google
in a
says
year?
20 years.
Google says 20 years, Google doesn't lie.
How many days in a year is this going to be used?
Well, we have multiple performances that we use, our fall play, our children's play, our musical. So and this is part of the curriculum that they use on a daily basis, so. We have a class, stage crafters, where set design is part of the class.
Would you please pull the board?
Frost.
Aye.
Oops. Arwell.
Aye.
Gorson.
Aye.
Moon's aye, no?
Aye.
Chang.
Hi.
Oh, well, this carries 6-0.
And then Sean, we have two first readings. One is for authorization, and this is for approval in November. One's for
Correct.
authorization of certificate for the 2021 levy.
Correct.
And CPI was relatively low last year, so we're
Correct.
looking at 1.4%.
Correct.
On that extension. And then another reading for authorization to replace multifunction devices
Correct.
as well.
Yeah, this is the lease. We'll have more information both in our meeting and in discussion.
Okay, so if you have any questions in the
Please reach out, yeah.
time, please reach out to Sean. Then we have some FOIA requests there as well. Sean and his team created a new cost tracker because we've had a series of FOIAs this year and the costs continue to escalate. So we're just sharing that information with you, and you can see where we're at on each of the FOIA requests specifically, their costs, but then also a summary as well. So we'll keep that running tally as we go throughout the year.
Can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So,
Second.
Any questions about the consent agenda for Eric? Okay, would you poll the board on the consent agenda, please?
Arwell.
aye.
Worcester.
Aye.
Moon's aye, no.
Aye.
Shane.
Aye.
Frost.
Aye.
6-0.
Okay, and then I have a couple items tonight before Steve had some conversation as well. The first is we provided a summary of Dr. Haney's first Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Parent Committee meeting. And Mark, would you like to maybe just give a quick overview of that meeting and the work that Luis has been doing with that new group?
Sure, so one of our efforts this year is to work more collaboratively in and among a lot of our different directors. And one of our folks, Mark Janik, who heads up family engagement, and Dr. Haney partnered to build a night where we invited 40 participants from diverse backgrounds who are parents or guardians of our students here at Stevenson to start to generate some really thoughtful dialogue about how we can work with that group of parents to open up communications about how to best support our more diverse student body. So it's the first time we've ever done that here at Stevenson, so we're really excited about that. And the focus of that group is really central to 3 different goals, is to engage the two-way conversation, which is written up a little bit in that summary Dr. Haney provided, to solicit input from that diverse group, and then to also share information and build relationships with that group of parents so that we're better offering access to how we can support parents and how we can support their students and gain insights from them. So that went really, really well, and we're really excited about that happening and work that Nora and Dr. Haney are doing together.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. And then in addition, Luis and Jamie have been working on a new piece of our website, which is our Equity, Access, and Inclusivity page. So that link will route you to that portion of our website. And you'll see different tabs for the purposes of our work, the different initiatives that our students are engaged in, the faculty and staff initiatives, different events that are being hosted throughout the year at different points, and then different ways that folks can get involved. So thank you, Jamie, for helping Luis pull all that together. We appreciate it. It looks fantastic. We also have just a couple quick items about our annual audit. One of the things that we talked about last year, Sean, was putting out an RFP for auditing services.
Yep.
And so we're going to hold off on that until we actually get
the other
audit, which is the next item, and we should be getting that in November. There was some health complications that came up, so our auditors are going to be getting that to us over the course of the next couple of weeks, and so you'll see that information relatively soon. And then you also see there our suspension report. And that brings us to Mr. Frost.
Okay. I promised Eric I would keep this to less than 45 minutes. So you can start timing.
I thought it was 4 or 5 minutes. Yeah. I'm gonna get some tea. I'm not leaving.
Yeah. You'll be back in 45 minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
So I think for everyone on the board except for Faye, this is a review of what we talked about 2 years ago. So the IASB has got the delegate convention on November 20th, where they vote on resolutions for how the IASB lobbyists lobby and promote or advocate for certain types of legislation done in Springfield. We typically have not been involved in this. Some of the things that they, let's just say we would not have an interest in some of the things that they get involved in or promote. Last year, we had several parents in the community come to us because one of the resolutions was a student safety and protection plan, where they would, the representatives would advocate in Springfield to allow employees of school districts to carry firearms on campus if they had a FOID card, a concealed carry card, and did some active shooter training. the board met, Faye, with these parents 2 years ago. We talked about this. The arguments really relate to whether this is a local control issue for the local school district to determine how best to protect the kids in their schools, as opposed to districts telling other districts how to protect their students. And ultimately, the concern we had, we realized as we did some research, is that only about 38%, even in the Chicago area, about 38% of the schools have SROs, and the balance do not. And so under this proposal, that 60% of the schools, if they wanted, would be able to arm employees in the school if they met these stated requirements. We're concerned about that because our concern is that there really aren't standards that are set by an appropriate agency. We don't know what the training is. And it affects our kids when they're going to these other districts for student activities as well. It's not just a local control issue. And we're not in a position to try and evaluate what kind of training a different school has required for people in their school to be armed. So we came up with a proposal or a response to this 2 years ago, which basically was modify this to say that we would be in support if what this did is it would require appropriate state agency like the Illinois State Police to specify training and certification requirements that they felt would make these people qualified, and then ongoing annual training and certifications as opposed to just taking a class or having a Floyd card. This resolution failed 2 years ago. It's being brought up again by the district that raised it before. And this time, I want to ask your permission to submit our proposal, because these parents said that they also think that the proposal we've got where you really had the statewide or state agency that has expertise in this area setting these standards and having these certification requirements would be a compromise, quite frankly, that could be for the benefit of our students. So I talked to the IASB about submitting a proposal, an amendment to the existing proposal. I don't know whether it would go anywhere, but I don't want to take any actions without your knowing about this and you're agreeing to it. But what I am suggesting is consistent with what we had all talked about before. And I assume that that's okay with you, but I'll ask that. Is that okay with everybody if I move forward on that? The second thing I wanted to mention is I sent to everybody the other resolutions that they have that they voted on.
Sorry.
I can't see going and voting on these 23 different motions. I may go and vote just so apparently you have to be there in person to vote and everything, so I may go to vote on the gun issue. One of the things that I definitely will vote against is the thing that I mentioned to you earlier, where someone wants it to be legal to provide school board member compensation. And I just don't think school board members should be, I don't think that's an expense that the district should incur. And I want to go and vote against that. There's some other things in here that I'll ask you to just take a look. I sent this to you. If something jumps out at you, let me know. I may vote on a few of these, but I don't want to sit here and talk about 23 of them with you. I'll give you the opportunity to look, and if it's okay with you, I'll just vote.
Your conscience says okay.
I'll vote my conscience if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I read through them, I didn't see anything that stood out other than those two really affecting us all that much either, so I trust your judgment, whatever that.
Okay, I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. And for the last 42 minutes that I have, okay, I think that's it, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.